signaled to a police dog, and what happened next stunned the entire station. Sergeant Rex froze in the middle of Central Station as if something invisible had grabbed his attention. His ears lifted sharply, tracking a sound or pattern no human could detect. Across the crowded platform, an 8-year-old boy was tapping lightly 5 taps. A pause, then 5 more, on the back of the elegant woman holding his hand far too tightly. For a split second, his frightened eyes met Rex's. Then he quickly looked away, like a child who'd been trained not to show emotion or call attention to himself. Tommy Wilson never imagined fear would become part of his life at such a young age. 3 weeks ago, he was playing in his grandmother's backyard. Now, dressed in expensive clothes and given a new haircut, he was being forced to pretend to be the child of people who treated him like an object, not a human being. "Keep your head down. Don't look at anyone," the woman murmured, tightening her grip until it hurt. "You know what happens if you don't listen." Detective James Morrison, Rex's partner for 7 years, followed the dog's intense stare. "What is it, Rex? What are you picking up?" Rex was never wrong, not in 7 years of working side by side. Yet there were no sense of harmful substances, nothing dangerous, nothing that could explain such overwhelming tension. This was something different, something human. Morrison watched the elegant family walking toward the 3:30 p.m. train to Seattle. Designer clothes, polite children, a confident-looking father on the phone, a picture-perfect family returning from a trip. Except Tommy's eyes. Those eyes didn't belong to a carefree 8-year-old. They carried a quiet, desperate fear. "Come on, Rex. We can't stop strangers just because you're acting unusual today," Morrison whispered, gently pulling on the leash. But Rex didn't move. For the first time in 7 years, he flat-out refused a direct command. His paws were rooted to the floor as he watched the boy vanish into the crowd, still tapping that silent pattern on the woman's back. Morrison's brow tightened. Rex never behaved like this without a solid reason. What if that child was trying to ask for help, in a way subtle enough to avoid alerting the adults, but clear enough for a trained dog to pick up? What Morrison didn't know was that Tommy had seen a documentary about police dogs weeks earlier at his grandmother's house. He remembered the secret code handlers used 5 taps. It was the only lifeline he had left. If you're wondering how an 8-year-old could think of such a clever plan, you're about to see how survival can spark instincts wiser than most adults could imagine. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe, because this story shows that heroes come in all sizes, and sometimes walk on 4 legs. The woman finally noticed Rex's unwavering stare. She pressed Tommy's hand painfully hard. "Stop acting hopeful," she hissed softly. "No one here is coming for you." Margaret Whitefield, 45, a polished, well-spoken specialist in international family placements, or rather, a woman who turned vulnerable children into luxury commodities, had perfected her role as a loving mother. Her husband, Richard, worked in corporate management, offering the perfect disguise. A well-educated couple saving less fortunate children. That was the story they sold. "Remember to behave like our son," Richard murmured to Tommy. His voice was calm, but the warning underneath was unmistakable. "You don't want things to go badly. Right?" Tommy swallowed. 3 weeks earlier, 2 men posing as social workers had shown up, claiming his mother had been in an accident and he needed to go with them. His grandmother was out shopping. Scared and confused, Tommy followed them, straight into a nightmare planned with chilling precision. By day, he was coached on how to smile for photos, which answers to memorize, which name to respond to. By night, locked inside expensive hotel rooms, he overheard conversations that made his stomach twist. People talking about deliveries, appointments, and final arrangements. Morrison kept watching the family, sensing something deeply wrong. Richard checked his phone repeatedly, scanning the station like someone expecting trouble. The way he held the older child's shoulder looked more like control than care. "Rec, stay," Morrison ordered quietly as he released the leash. "We're following them. Carefully." Rex slipped through the crowd like a shadow, never losing sight of Tommy. His instincts were fully awake now, and he wasn't about to let the boy disappear again. Rex knew instantly. That little boy didn't move like a child who felt safe. He didn't carry the scent of family, comfort, or trust. Nothing about him matched the calmness of a true parent-child bond. Margaret noticed the dog getting closer. Her eyes narrowed. She leaned toward Richard and whispered sharply. He immediately pulled out his phone. Change of plans. A police dog is following us. Start Protocol B. Tommy heard the words and his heart dropped. Protocol B meant they would make him sleep for hours, move him somewhere new, and erase any chance of being rescued in time. But Morrison was closer than they realized. 15 years of working missing child cases had trained him to see what others ignored. This family was too stiff, too controlled, too rehearsed. Nothing felt natural. He quietly pressed his radio. Dispatch, I need permission to verify documents for a suspicious group on Train 247, Platform 12. Possible child in danger. Negative, Morrison. No warrant. No clear cause. You can't approach people based on a feeling. Tommy glanced back, and for 2 precious seconds, his eyes met Rex's again. This time he took a risk that could cost him everything. He subtly pointed at Richard's backpack while tapping the 5-tap code on his own leg. Rex barked one sharp, decisive sound that cut through the noise of the station. Morrison caught the signal. That wasn't a random bark, and Tommy wasn't just scared, he was communicating. Then it hit him. What if Rex wasn't sensing harmful materials, but traces of other children tied to this family's luggage? Margaret snapped around, furious. Last warning, she whispered, gripping Tommy's wrist hard enough to leave a mark. You bring attention to yourself again, and you'll meet the place where disobedient ones are taken. But she didn't know the truth. Tommy had spent 3 weeks listening, memorizing, and studying every detail of their operation. He knew names. He knew meeting places. He knew the secret codes. And he knew enough to expose everything. Morrison, who trusted Rex more than any human, was beginning to understand. The dog wasn't just reacting. He was responding to a brilliant, terrified child trying to engineer his own rescue. The train screeched into the platform. Tommy inhaled deeply. This was it. If Rex was trying to save him, he would give the dog every clue he could. Inside the train, Tommy was pushed into a window seat. Margaret positioned herself beside him, blocking any escape route. Richard sat across from them, pretending to read a newspaper while keeping the aisle under strict watch. The other children, Lisa, 10, and Marcus, 12, sat still as statues, trained not to speak or even blink too much. Remember the story, Margaret whispered. We're a cheerful family coming back from a fun vacation. Dad works in tech, I'm a teacher, and you're our wonderful adopted kids. Tommy nodded, but his mind raced. During his 3 weeks of captivity, he had gathered everything they didn't want him to know. Margaret managed 6 connected families across 5 states. Richard handled transport and forged records. And the true leader, known only as Doctor, never appeared in person. As the train sped up, Tommy saw Margaret texting, Package 3 on schedule. Client waiting in Seattle. Transfer confirmed to Cayman, account 4472, $45,000. That was the price placed on his life. In the next car, Detective Morrison quietly showed Tommy's photo to the train conductor. Have you seen this child? Possible danger, but I can't intervene without confirmation. Conductor Helen Rodriguez studied the photo. Yes, I saw him with a very polished family in car 7, but the woman showed adoption papers. She said he was her son. Papers can be fabricated, Morrison said calmly, and my partner Rex reacted strongly. He's never wrong. Helen hesitated. Now that you mention it, the boy looked tense, and the woman was holding him far too tightly. Morrison's instincts lit up. May I take a discreet look? Back in car 7, Tommy was putting the boldest part of his plan into motion. 3 weeks around, criminals had taught him one thing. Documents were everything, and during a bathroom break 2 days earlier, he'd seen Richard hide a specific folder inside a backpack, not just his forged papers, but files of more than a dozen missing children. Tommy suddenly clutched his stomach. I think I'm going to be sick, he whispered. I need the bathroom. Lisa will go with you, Margaret ordered. 5 minutes. No more. Lisa, hollowed out by months of fear, obeyed without protest. But in the corridor, Tommy leaned close and whispered something that made her freeze. Do you want to see your real family again? He asked. Tears pooled in the girl's eyes. They don't want me, she said. That's not true, Tommy answered, with a steadiness no 8-year-old should have. My grandma taught me families never give up. Will you help me? Meanwhile, Helen Rodriguez slipped quietly alongside Detective Morrison and headed for car 7. Rex had followed Tommy into the corridor and was now pawing gently at the door, uneasy. Helen pointed toward Margaret and Richard. There, that couple, she said. Morrison watched them with the kind of attention that comes from years on the job. On the surface, they looked ordinary, well-dressed, polite, confident, but their movements told a different story. The woman kept checking her phone like she was waiting for orders. The man clutched a backpack as if it held something priceless. The children sat unnaturally still, like they'd been trained. Helen, I need a favor, Morrison whispered. Go over, ask to see their tickets, gauge their reaction to authority. Helen approached with a friendly smile. Hi there, routine check. Mind showing me your tickets and the kids' paperwork? Richard's hands trembled as he fumbled for his wallet. They're in the restroom, but yes, of course. We have everything. He moved too quickly for someone without something to hide. That's when Tommy reappeared in the aisle, followed by Lisa. As he passed Helen, he did something bold, far bolder than the 5 taps. He dropped a tiny folded scrap of paper at her feet, barely noticeable in the rush. Margaret didn't see it. Richard was preoccupied with his documents. But Helen did. She opened the note and read a child's hurried handwriting. We are not their children. Help! There are 12 of us. Black backpack has proof. A chill went through her. Helen locked eyes with Morrison and passed the warning without words. Tommy slid back into his seat, pulse racing. He had risked everything on that single gesture. He watched Richard handle the backpack with fingers that betrayed nerves. Inside that pack lay proof that could bring down the whole ring. Margaret relaxed when Helen walked away looking satisfied. See, she said, poisonous with relief. Act like a normal family and no one suspects a thing. What she didn't realize was how much Tommy had learned in 3 weeks. He hadn't just survived, he'd studied every detail of their operation. Names, routes, account numbers, and the very place where other children were hidden. Morrison returned to his car and spoke into the radio with quiet urgency. Dispatch, I have probable cause for a kidnapping on train 247, car 7. Request immediate interception at the next station. Negative, Morrison. Need more concrete evidence, came the clipped reply. Then we'll get it, he murmured, glancing down at Rex. The dog wasn't just smelling trouble. He'd found a boy bold enough to stage his own rescue inside a machine built for secrecy. Tommy watched the countryside blur by. Port Inn was the next stop. 7 minutes. 7 minutes to finish the plan that an 8-year-old had composed from watching professionals do their dirty work. Margaret checked her phone and smiled at her imagined victory. 2 hours to Seattle, she cooed. Soon you'll be with your new family. You'll learn to obey. The others nearby thought Tommy looked afraid, but those who watched closely would have seen something else in his gaze. Not only fear, but iron resolve. He had turned 3 weeks of terror into a lesson on how criminals think, and now he planned to use that knowledge to take them down. The Portland station drew near like an alarm clock. It was now or never. I need the bathroom, Tommy said suddenly, clutching his stomach and pushing the line into his voice. His timing was flawless. Margaret rolled her eyes. Lisa, go with him. Don't take longer than 5 minutes. In the narrow hallway, he leaned toward Lisa and whispered his final instructions. When we get in there, scream as loud as you can. Say they're not our parents. Say they'll hurt us. If people hear, they'll help. Lisa trembled but nodded. If people are around, maybe it'll work. Back in the other car, Morrison had convinced Helen to press for one more check. Ask for the children's birth certificates, he suggested. Criminals get nervous over paperwork. Helen walked up to Margaret and Richard again, voice friendly but firm. Excuse me, might I see the children's birth certificates? It's standard for interstate travel. The trap was set. Richard froze. The documents are in our carry-on, he stammered. I'll get them when the children return. No problem, I can wait. Helen smiled pleasantly and sat down right next to them, refusing to leave. Margaret's fingers flew across her phone. Problem. Inspector asking for detailed documents. Abort mission. A message came back instantly. Impossible. Payment confirmed. Handled discreetly. And then, Lisa's scream tore through the entire train car. We are not their children. They took us. Help! Everything stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. Heads turned. Passengers stood up. Tommy sprinted into the aisle, shouting at the top of his lungs, "She's telling the truth. We're not their kids." Margaret shot to her feet, trying to force calm into her voice. "Our children are having an emotional episode. You know how—" But Tommy cut her off, stronger and louder than ever. "If we're your children, then tell everyone my full name, my birthday, where I was born. Go on, say it." Margaret's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Richard's hands shook as he clutched the black backpack. "My name is Tommy Andrew Wilson," the boy declared, voice echoing across the car. "I was born on June 15th in Detroit. My grandmother is Betty Wilson, at 247 Oak Street. My dad is Jerome Wilson, and he's in the Army." Helen Rodriguez felt each detail like a punch. "Sir," she said to Richard, voice turning sharp as ice, "open that backpack, now." "You have no authority," Richard began. But that's when Detective Morrison stepped into the aisle, Rex at his side. The dog rushed straight to Tommy, tail wagging, barking with unmistakable relief. "Detective Morrison, Police Department," he announced, flashing his badge. "I have all the authority I need. Open the backpack, or I'll do it myself." Margaret tried one last desperate lie. "Officer, this is all a misunderstanding. These children are confused." Tommy stepped forward with the determination of someone 3 times his age. "Should I tell everyone here the names of the other 9 kids you're hiding in Seattle? Or should I tell them about the $45,000 someone paid for me?" The car went silent. Passengers lifted their phones, recording. An elderly woman covered her mouth, horrified. Morrison ripped open the backpack. Inside were forged documents, altered passports, photos of missing children, a notebook listing names, ages, and prices. It was worse than anything he expected. "Margaret Whitefield, Richard Sullivan," Morrison read. "You are under arrest for—" "Wait," Margaret yelled, cracking completely. "You don't understand. We rescued these children from hard lives. We gave them opportunities." Tommy stared her down, his voice steady as steel. $45,000 isn't rescuing, ma'am. It's selling." Rex stepped protectively between the children and the couple, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Helen grabbed her radio. "Emergency! Stop the train! Repeat, stop the train!" As the brakes screeched, Morrison cuffed the pair. "You have the right to remain silent." "He's just a child," Richard yelled, completely unraveling. "How did an 8-year-old beat us?" For the first time in 3 weeks, Tommy smiled, a small, wise smile that didn't belong on a child's face. "My grandma always said, if you're the weakest in the room, be the smartest. You thought I was just some item, but I've been studying you since day one." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an old scratch tape recorder. 3 weeks of recordings, Tommy said. Names, calls, addresses, everything. Margaret collapsed where she stood. Lisa and Marcus threw their arms around Tommy, crying with relief. Passengers applauded. Someone offered chocolate. Another called the numbers Tommy remembered, alerting police about other children who needed help. When the train finally stopped, an entire operation was already waiting. FBI, police, social workers. With the evidence in that backpack and the recordings in Tommy's hand, they dismantled the whole network before the wheels cooled. Morrison knelt beside him. "How'd you know Rex would understand you?" "My grandma showed me a documentary," Tommy said, stroking Rex's fur. "Police dogs know when kids need help. They understand signals even when adults don't." Helen wiped a tear. "In 20 years on trains, I've never seen courage like yours." As officers escorted Margaret and Richard off the train, Margaret screamed one last defiant warning. "This won't stop anything. We're only one branch." But she was wrong. She had underestimated an 8-year-old who refused to give up. Tommy looked at Margaret through the station window, and in that moment she finally understood the scale of her mistake. The determination in his eyes was unshakable. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "I memorized everything. The names, the places, the accounts, the routes. Once I talked to the FBI, your whole operation is finished. Rex barked once, sharp, proud, victorious, a sound that echoed through the entire station. And for a moment, as officers and social workers surrounded the brave 8-year-old, one question hung heavily in the air. How did a child manage to bring down an international criminal network using nothing but courage, quick thinking, and the loyalty of a dog who believed in him when no adult did? The answer was in Tommy's eyes that had turned 3 weeks of fear into the greatest rescue victory the region had ever seen. 6 months later, Tommy Wilson sat in the front row of a federal courtroom, his feet barely touching the ground, as Margaret Whitefield and Richard Sullivan faced their sentencing. 25 years in federal prison with no chance of early release. The child they once treated as powerless had become the key witness who dismantled a global ring. Judge Henderson spoke with emotion rarely heard in a courtroom. Tommy Wilson's testimony is one of the most remarkable this court has ever witnessed. An 8-year-old displayed more bravery and investigative instinct than many seasoned professionals. Margaret turned to look at Tommy one last time as officers led her away. The arrogance that once fueled her was gone, replaced by the empty stare of someone who realized she had lost everything. Richard couldn't even lift his head. The once confident executive was now a hollow figure, undone by the intelligence of the child he had underestimated. In the gallery, Detective Morrison stood beside Rex, both of them quietly proud. Helen Rodriguez had traveled just to witness the verdict. "You know the most incredible part?" Morrison whispered to her. "It wasn't luck. Tommy had planned every step from the very first day of his captivity. The investigation sparked by his information led to 43 arrests across 7 states. 86 children were rescued from situations of illegal adoption, forced labor, and abuse. And the mysterious doctor, the person at the top of the organization, finally had a name. Dr. Harrison Blackwood, a respected Boston pediatrician who used his hospital access to secretly select premium victims. For over a decade, he had hidden behind the reputation of a caring doctor, while running one of the largest child exploitation networks in the country. But an 8-year-old boy destroyed everything he built. Tommy had memorized names, addresses, bank routes, even computer passwords he heard whispered over late-night phone calls. His young mind became a living database strong enough to dismantle an entire criminal empire. During one of the final FBI interviews, Agent Amanda Cross asked him gently, "How did you manage to remember all this?" Tommy replied with the calm wisdom of someone far older. "My grandmother always said, when you don't have the strength to fight, you fight using your mind. They thought I was just scared, but I was studying them while they watched us." Operation Tommy, as it was officially named, became a case study across police academies nationwide. An 8-year-old boy had done what specialized task forces struggled to accomplish for years. Armed with courage, intelligence, and instinct, he'd exposed an entire criminal ring. His grandmother, Betty Wilson, hugged him tightly in court. "I always knew you were special, baby, but I never imagined you'd save so many." His father, Jerome Wilson, obtained emergency leave from the Army to witness the sentencing. With tears in his eyes, he said, "Son, in 3 weeks you've done more for others than most people do in a lifetime." Lisa and Marcus, the children rescued with him, were recovering. Lisa was rebuilding her confidence through therapy, and Marcus, though still struggling from a longer captivity, now carried real hope for the future. Detective Morrison was promoted to lieutenant and became a national expert in child protection investigations. Rex received a Medal of Honor and retired as the most decorated K-9 in the department's history. But for both of them, the greatest reward was simple. They had trusted their instincts when everyone around them doubted them. Helen Rodriguez left her job on trains and became the coordinator of an NGO dedicated to identifying signs of danger in public transportation. "Tommy taught me that heroes come in all sizes," she said during a training session. "Sometimes we just need to look more closely at the children around us." Serentan, Margaret Whitefield entered federal prison with the same arrogance she had always carried, but it vanished quickly. Other inmates learned what she had done, and her life became a daily torment. Richard Sullivan suffered a psychological collapse, unable to accept that an 8-year-old had been the one to end everything. Dr. Blackwood lost his medical license, his wealth, and his reputation. He was sentenced to life in prison. He repeated the same question endlessly to anyone who would listen. How did a child bring down all of us? Tommy's new life. Tommy returned to school like any other child, but he carried a quiet certainty. He had changed the world. His grades rose. He made new friends. He discovered a love for investigation and began dreaming of a future in law enforcement. During a national TV interview, Tommy was asked what he learned from the ordeal. He smiled softly. I learned that adults who do bad things underestimate kids. They think we're small, so we're not smart. But my grandma always said intelligence isn't about size. And what would you say to children who might be in danger? The host asked. Tommy thought for a moment. Never give up. Pay attention to everything. And if you ever see a police dog, remember they're trained to protect kids. They'll understand if you ask for help the right way. Rex, sitting proudly beside him in the studio, barked once as if to confirm every word. Tommy Wilson's story proved something powerful. Heroism isn't about age or strength. It's about courage, intelligence, and refusing to accept injustice as normal. Margaret Whitefield had tried to break a child. Instead, she was defeated by the very determination she overlooked. At just 8 years old, Tommy showed the world that sometimes the smallest warriors fight the biggest battles and win. If this story inspired you and reminded you that true courage knows no age, remember to subscribe for more powerful stories where justice triumphs because someone refused to stay silent.